So I guess I wanted to tell you a little bit about my journey going through the 2016 Margaret River Short Story Competition. It was arguably the most fun I've had without taking my clothes off. In November 2015, Richard Rossiter, Donna Mazza and myself received 192 short stories.
Wow.
Of varying styles, subjects and quality. I immediately bought some seriously good ground coffee and an industrial supply of chocolate and I began reading. One broken ankle, the rescheduling of 2 separate judge meetings and a Skype call in later, and we were able to compile our long list of 46 entries. At this point, it's worth considering what exactly constitutes a long list. Is it really all that long? Is it a list? Well, yes, of course it's a list. But how long should it be? And what defines what makes great and what on this occasion was not selected? In 2016, each judge assembled our top 10 to 20 stories as we saw them. And I'm happy to say that we shared many entries on our lists, and that as a whole, those stories were the ones you found in Shibboleth. To those who submitted and weren't selected for Shibboleth and other stories, take heart. If those 46 long list of stories were strong, then the final selection of 24 were, for lack of a better term, first class. In my time judging competitions and reading submission files, I've never come across such a uniformly strong series of stories as the ones you'll find on this book. Tonight you'll hear stories from 3 of those writers. There's The Sea Also Waits by Emily Paul, which immediately had me with its opening line, 6 nights ago, my mother disappeared into the ocean. The rest of the story is just as strong and sad, and it resonates. A stone dropped into water, a moment captured, and a writer finding her own inimitable gloss. You'll also hear Michaela Castledine's All the Devil's Weed Plants, a lyrical prose poem of husbands and wives, of memories and forgetting. There's a manic tragic energy to this story, and it's a story that commands to be heard and felt out loud. And finally, we'll hear Brown Snake from Kate Noski, which is a different beast, but no less poignant one and quite powerful. And it's a brutal tale, but one that is not easily forgotten once read.
It shows commitment and patience and has resulted in growing significance. This sort of stability in the literary scene is precious. There are many things writers need, but near the top of the list is opportunities to publish good work and reach an audience, hopefully beyond other writers. Congratulations to Caroline and John Wood and the rest of the team. And what a good looking book it is. Susan Miller has created a wonderful cover, and the typesetting and production is superb. Laurie's curated an excellent collection. It's often a thankless task being an editor. Editors are blamed for sloppy books, but not often praised for good books, because their influence can be invisible. Laurie has chosen well, arranged well, and brought the best out of these writers. It starts with the prize-winning story, Shibboleth, a poignant and complex story, and it continues a high standard right through to the finish. The reading mind can't help but look for patterns. This collection is a delightful combination of randomness and connections. I'll mention 3 patterns that I found. Dementia is a recurring theme. Coming up in Magdalena Maguire's It Used to Be a Boyd, Georgina Luck's The Memory Mirror, Michaela Castledine's All the Devil's Weed Plants, and Phil Sparrow's Theo. So many of us have loved ones suffering dementia, and fiction is one of the best ways to express this experience. Another, both Catherine Moffat's Slacklining and Laura Elvery's Acrobat use a literal tightrope as a symbol for their characters to interact with in such different settings. One's suburban, the other is in Melbourne's Federation Square. In darker territory, Julia Kearney's Fork in the Path and Catherine Noski's Brown Snake are placed next to each other as 2 stories about protagonists brought to a crisis point after witnessing a sexual transgression. One of the joys of this anthology is its broad Australian range. It's across so many different settings. However, given this is the Western Australian launch for the book, without wanting to be parochial, I'd like to focus on the 7, by my count, stories from Western Australian authors, and I'm just really hoping at this point I haven't missed one of you out. In Catherine Noski's Brown Snake, We only ever know as much as its viewpoint character, Maya, a girl staying with her aunt and uncle on a sheep farm. The title is explained in the first sentence. From the bridge, the river moves slowly and lazy like a brown snake. Yet the metaphor for the river and the river itself take on more significance and weight over the rest of the story, as a girl, Maya, witnesses something she shouldn't. It's a subtle story and it's wise about childhood. And I've just learnt that it's actually inspired by Launceston. That was one state I didn't know we'd covered. Emily Paul's The Sea Also Waits begins with a hook, as Laurie has already stolen the thunder of. 6 nights ago, my mother disappeared into the ocean. In invoking the world of diving, the story has a surreal quality and a sense that it symbolises much more than it says. It has a line which I love. I cut the motor. The silence was sudden, like a lid had been put onto the world. Helen Renwick's The Treasure Box unfolds in a single scene on a train. It's tightly written and requires the reader to pay close attention to understand. A mother and daughter recognise the so-called treasure box of the title and the experience another passenger is going through, invisible as it is to everyone else on the train. The train moved on, crowded and sleek, scraps and snippets of overlapping stories and sadness bundled into its carriages. Rachel Rashishi's Composition is a story told through the eyes of a mother and her abused 6-year-old self. The voice is convincing and accomplished. Christopher Robin wants to be 6 forever and ever. I leave 6 behind in years, but I never truly leave 6. I bring it with me in my body and my mind. There are places that stay untouched beyond 6. There are scars that never leave and sounds that never go. Leslie Teal's The Boat narrates the midlife crisis of Vic on the boat of the title. What surprised me was the unusual optimism of this story, which starts with Vic disillusioned with his marriage, but finishes with him reaffirming it. It's a story which evokes fishing and the ocean so well and captures a particular type of masculinity. He lay in the bottom of the boat, he and the fish both gasping, drowning in their separate ways. Michaelia Castledean's All the Devil's Weed Plants has the density and vividness of poetry. In just a few pages, it depicts the life of an elderly couple, the wife with dementia. It's sad and beautiful. Anger is a liquid, capillary climbing thin-walled vessels that show dark as it passes. It fills the empty spaces where she used to live, where only neurons dangle, torn-ended and sparking. Phil Sparrow's Theo tells the story of the narrator's last visits to his great-uncle who has dementia. As though the furniture of his mind is continually being reordered, he's been given the curse of confusion and it has unseated him. It's told in present tense, but the scenes have gaps of time between them. The whole story has the complexity of a novel and the randomness of life. The elusiveness of its narrator left me hungry for more. I was hoping to see Phil tonight. He used to live a few doors down from him, but he's in Afghanistan. In launching this book, I wish it not just a season of flourishing now at its publication. I wish it a long afterlife, an echo through years. As the copies you buy tonight, and all the other copies, move out into the world, may some of them eventually find themselves rediscovered on parents' bookshelves, or in op shops, or in libraries, read by people who may not even be born yet. May they be surprised and enthralled and taken into the world of these stories. And in 100 years, may there be some PhD student analysing this book as a mosaic of our times. Whatever our point in history will have become by then. And I think they will be looking back to this point in history as something. Shibboleth and Other Stories is a collection worth celebrating and worthy of enduring.
Thank you, Nathan.
My first line has already been a couple of times, so I read the first line again. 6 nights ago, my mother disappeared into the ocean. This wasn't unusual. She was a freediver. She had been submerging herself for as many years as I have been alive. There were moments I was almost convinced that she loved the ocean more than she loved me. She'd suggested that we take the tinny out into the bay, put on our wetsuits and dive into the last warm shoals where the reef drops away. She sat on the bench in the boat, gripping her nails into the wood of the seat to stop from bouncing up and down. I was tired and steered the boat with a degree of disinterest, drifting this way and that out over the bay. Finally, she held her hand up to stop me, but her eyes stayed on the water. "Here," she said. "Damien, stop here." I cut the motor. The silence was sudden, like a lid had been put onto the world. There was only the splashing of waves against our aluminium sides like a heartbeat. She slipped off her dress. It pooled in a puddle of fabric on the boat's floor. Underneath, as always, were her bathers. The boat rocked side to side as she slipped into her wetsuit. It went on like a second skin. Freediving wetsuits are thin and low buoyancy to aid the diver's descent. Hers was a deep shade of blue, which made her hard to see once she went under. She loved the idea that her wetsuit might make her invisible. She'd been wearing it when she set the record for the deepest freedive in Australia. That time, there had been a rope to measure the depth and to tether her. There were judges and lifeguards and other divers. This night, there was only me, but she wasn't going for the record. She'd dive a few times, scratch whatever itch she had that needed to be scratched, and we'd go home for dinner. Zipping the suit up, she looked at me and grinned. "Are you coming in?" I shook my head. It had been weeks since I had had time to dive. I was studying. I had decided to become a journalist. I wanted to get into university, but I'd been homeschooled for so long that it sometimes felt as if my homework was written in another language. Once I had wanted to be a world-famous freediver too, but the idea seemed less and less possible the longer I spent away from it. I'd started to think of the things my mother and I had done as stories, things that had happened to other people. Surely we had never floated face down in the Garibaldi swimming pool for 9 minutes. Surely we had not flown to Greece to compete in the World Championships while other kids were learning their times tables. Surely we did not take the tinny out into the bay in the middle of the night in order to swim to the bottom of the ocean with weights around our necks. Yet there we were. She slipped over the side and I picked at a fleck of paint that had peeled off the inside of the boat, trying to make the biggest piece possible. It was like peeling the scales from a fish. Mum reached into the boat for her goggles, her hair slicked back. In the dark, it looked like seal's fur, her eyes now brighter with her eyelashes webbed together. She smiled. Her skin had turned pale where it reflected the water. She lay on her back, tucked her knees up to secure the monofin. I leaned my head against my arms on the side of the boat and the tinny tipped slightly towards her, bringing us face to face. She reached out and pressed her sodden hand to my cheek. I couldn't wait for her to exhaust herself so that we could just go home and I could do my homework and then we could both go to bed. My mother began her breathing exercises, taking short breaths and then expelling the air from her lungs in longer and longer bursts. It was a process called breathing up. It brought to mind the way the body fought for oxygen as you raced back to the surface. The sounds she made were alarming. It was like an asthma attack. It was essential that I did not talk to her while she readied herself, or she'd lose count and have to start again. Finally, she was ready. She nodded, signalling that I should start the stopwatch. My mother tucked her body up and then she was under. The only markers to say where she'd been were the tiny concentric rings where the water had been displaced. My job was to wait, to watch the seconds tick away and be ready with the towel. Already I was thinking about the feast we would eat. It was a warm night. My mother was fond of barbecued pork drizzled with sweet, thick sauce. The dives always made her ravenous. The bay was calm and silent. I saw boats on the far side of the bay bobbing up and down in the marina. So many this year, and more were staying. The holiday bungalows would soon be gone, replaced with reclaimed timber houses 3 stories high, with tennis courts, swimming pools, and glimpses of the ocean from the balcony. Once, when I was younger, my mother had taken me to practice in the bay. It was full of vacationers in bright new swimmers. A lady doing the breaststroke had heard us breathing up and thought we were drowning. She swam over to us on her back, waving with her closed fist to signal the lifesavers. She was a very fit lady, but she'd struggled, kicking her legs at odd angles and trying to hold both Mum and me up at the same time. I'd struggled against her grasp, but she began to sink and my mouth filled with water. There was no way for me to explain what she was doing. Mum had continued her breathing, a wry, bemused look on her face, allowing the lady to hold her up by one armpit. By the time the lifesaver paddled out to us on his foam board, Mum was ready to dive. Instead, she blinked as if she were emerging from a dream and looked at our would-be rescuer and said, "Oh, hello." The woman looked confused and slightly waterlogged, her chin disappearing beneath the water in an attempt to hold us both up. Mum was kicking again now, her powerful fins doing some of the work, and the lady let go slowly, her hand drifting back to her side. The lifesaver adjusted the white ties at his throat and laughed. "Hello, Katerina," he said, shaking his head. "Teaching Damo to dive, are you?" Mum grinned. "How are the kids, Shane?" The lady looked between Mum and the lifesaver in disbelief. "Excuse me," she said, sounding a little woozy. "Could someone please tell me what's going on?" He chuckled. "You've just rescued one of the world's most famous freedivers. I don't believe you could drown Katerina if you tried. It's widely believed she's part fish."
All the devil's weed plants that are growing in between are yours. He is sweeping the driveway clear, like Cinderella set upon an endless task. It is raining, leaves will fall, and the weeds are pushing through. He is not Cinderella. He is old, a man still full of his former strength, and he will not be transformed, and he will not be saved. Inside the house she shouts and mutters, and in truth he would rather be here, sweeping, damply, weeping in the driveway. In the kitchen she is simmering. Her cooking has gone to shit, he says, but not out loud. She is looking for saucepans in all the closed cupboards. She looks for bowls in all the open drawers. She garnishes orange juice with cut chives. She sugars tea with coffee. He sweeps the driveway and pulls at the weeds. The ailments of the old grow up through the cracks. They trip him and bind him. The thorns prick his skin and test his blood. He is converting starches to complex sugars, such a sweet old man. He feels the steady pressure of their tendrils around his upper arm and the restarting of his pulse. She is as fit as a flea, fighting fit, biting fit. She sees no weeds, and yet there is one come up. The roots are breaking things apart. The laid paths are crumbled. Everything that was anchored is unmoored. Everything that was ordered is strewn. She tells him he's a bastard who never loved her. She hits him in the night. She tells him not to answer the phone while she has her hair done in case he's having an affair. He doesn't answer the phone on Fridays between 9 and 10. He sweeps the driveway and doesn't have an affair, but he thinks he might as well have for all the trouble he's in. He wonders who would have him and what possible use he might be to them. She is in a fury for not being told, so he tells her again. She is in a fury for the hours of loneliness while he went to take a piss. So he tries to hold on. This is a problem. Piss must be taken, and it takes him longer now than it used to. Still, he was only away for a minute or two behind the bathroom door. But she is in a fury for all the dark disorder, and nothing he can do will placate her, and he must gain his relief in any way he can. Anger is a liquid, capillary climbing, thin-walled vessels that show dark as it passes. It fills the empty spaces where she used to live, where now only neurons dangle torn-ended and sparking. It is a conductive liquid, long-chained and thicker than water. It soaks up her poor thoughts, lets them flow, feels electric, like thinking used to, and is better than nothing. He is writing memoirs from his childhood, from his first 30 years. 50 more they've been together, but he makes a point of not writing the living. Could he write her back, her love, her laughter, her bountiful food, her fruitful pictures, her clever hands, her prayers, her songs? The task is beyond him, her elegance and fun, her politics and argument, all their happy years. They have gone. He primes and pulls the starter with his old strength and is cutting the weeds. She throws stones to gain his attention, shouting at him over the two-stroke. He locks the door of the house to prevent her escape. She cuts the blind with scissors because she must see out. The clocks are baffling, the hours unravel. Each day is colder, hotter, longer than the last. Every help is pity. Every admission breaks them. This is the best they will be. Tomorrow will be worse. This is not better than nothing. But there is nothing to be done, and it takes all day. No one is to know, not her pretty children now grown, not her friends of decades. Weeds are growing. He hides the scissors. She bites off the green shoots with her teeth. She tastes the bitter herbs. He is weeping, the driveway is leaved, he is unblocking drains and cutting weeds. He clears the roots and the water runs. The weeds grow fast and green. He pulls them from the driveway, but they are spreading, green and lush, and he is helpless.
I was actually sitting up the back there. I got so mesmerised by those last two pieces and I forgot to be able to read. So thank you both for that lovely work. From the bridge, the river moves slow and lazy like a brown snake, head flat to the mud, black eyes, tasting the world as it goes. Maya watches and wonders how simple water can look so venomous. Back at the house, Maya can hear her aunt on the telephone talking to her mother. Her mother has her sympathy voice on, hot down the line like the sun outside. Oh, Maya, it says that voice, oh, honey. Like there's something in there blaming her, some sharp little blade to the pity. She brings it on herself. In trouble at school, and oh, Maya. Money stolen, and oh, Maya. Like, oh, Maya, when you going to learn? I don't know, her aunt says, her back to Maya and one hand twining the cord. He's just disappearing again. Oh, honey, comes her mother's voice. Maya slips behind her and hides upstairs. She can hear from her bedroom when her aunt has headed outside, the rattle of the dog chain, the shed opening, being forced open, the runners broke and it going with the sound of bare tin on concrete just about yelling aloud. Her aunt singing, deep-voiced and throaty, Holy Moses, something, something, don't you forsake me. Lying on her bed, the sun strong through the bare window, Maya listens and thinks of her mother singing and washing dishes. How she sings when no one's listening. The woman of her family, singing alone. We always sing, Maya thinks, when we're sad. Maya closes her eyes and the sun hot and red through her eyelids. She listens for the feed buckets and the paddock gate, the sounds that say her aunt has gone to feed the horses. And when they fade, for the rattle of the cattle grid, the barking of the dog that says her uncle is home, back from disappearing to wherever it is he goes. Listens and lets the afternoon fade around her. Her uncle brings her treats, sneaking them to her when her aunt isn't watching, sitting at the table after dinner with her holiday homework, slipping a little packet of chocolate Rolos so she can suck on the caramel while her aunt cleans up. Every time he smiles and winks and Maya grins. Too smart for an old man like me, he says, all those numbers. Maya has to smother her smile so her aunt won't notice the mouthful of chocolate, won't find the packet hidden in her skirt. Don't you distract the girl, her aunt calls from the kitchen, just you leave her to work. And her uncle winks again and disappears, this time to the lounge room to recharge his batteries in front of the TV, his own time, and leaves Maya to puzzle over the multiplication of fractions and how a man can disappear when he still makes it home for dinner. Shall I keep going or stop?
Sure, you can go.
Her aunt wakes her early the next morning, gently presses weight to Maya's shoulder so she wakes with a sensation of unevenness, like one half of her body has come up to the surface before the other. Her aunt nods when she blinks and stretches. Good girl, she says, come on now. Her aunt pads out again. They are drenching the sheep, Maya remembers, starting early before the heat gets its legs on. As she thinks of it, she becomes conscious of the faint noise from the yards, her uncle calling to the dogs, the murmuring of the sheep. And so Maya nods and drags herself from the sheets and pulls on yesterday's clothes from the floor. Her aunt hands her a piece of toast as she wanders through the kitchen. Don't forget your hat, she calls after her, going to be warm down there. At the yards, her uncle is wearing the drenched gun with the backpack bending him double, straddling each ewe and shoving it down their throats. Maya watches for a moment before she joins him, each ewe in rhythm, pulling their head up to stretch the soft gullet and the metal gun down the side of the mouth, clicking on the teeth. Pump and hold and release, and then her uncle tags the ewe with red paint and pushes her on. He has a bandana over his mouth and nose, like a cowboy or a bushranger. Paint sticks are in the shed, he calls. Use the blue and I'll know you've done it, eh? Maya nods. The drenched pack is waiting for her, leaning against the tin. There is a little bag of sweeties sat on top and she smiles. She heaves the pack over her shoulders and it catches on the paint stick in her pocket. Blue paint leaks out to tag the front of her dress. Maya watches as it spreads in a strain across one leg, unwraps one of the lollies and sucks on it contemplatively. Come on, girlie, her uncle calls. Plenty more after this lot. Maya climbs the fence into the yards opposite her uncle and grabs the first ewe by the fleece. She straddles her, legs tighten the crush of sheep and pulls at her throat. Sorry, girlie, she wants to say. Race you to the middle, her uncle calls, the challenge muffled beneath his bandana.
Sorry girl, Maya whispers and releases her ewe. Blue paint down her back and they're matching.
Hey, and thank you to all the readers tonight. Now, as you read this book, which hopefully you've purchased, and as you enjoy your wine, I'd like you to think of Phil Sparrow, who is in Afghanistan. I guess Bali was all booked up. Now, I have some thanks to get out of the way, so I'll get those done as quickly as possible so you can enjoy your nibblies, your reading, etc. I'd like to thank all the contributors, those who are here and those who are not. Also, for those of you who are writers in the audience, the 2017 Margaret River Short Story Competition is now open for entries, so if you head to the website for more information, you'll find it there. And this year's editor will be Alan Van Neerven, who wrote a book called Heat and Light, and is quality left, right and centre. Finally, enjoy your drinks. Thank you so much for coming out to all of you. I know it's a cold Thursday night. You know, having a John C. Reilly lookalike talk to you about books is not exactly everyone's idea of fun, but thankfully we have some great readers, we have a great book, and by all means I hope you enjoy it, and thanks again for coming.